All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. Welcome to your weekly video podcast live stream show, The Versus Live. We talk all things poetry to guide you in this process. There is me. Hello, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
And today we are talking about, well, a topic that I think is going to be relevant for those of you who are interested in trying to get a book out into the world. What do you need to be considering to get a jump on that process? And we're going to be kind of tag teaming to come up with 5 questions and maybe a few bonus ones that you want to be considering if you are writing or considering writing a poetry collection, a chapbook, a full length, whatever you see fit.
Oh, yeah. Do you think like the apostles were like, man, I really want to get these books out here, but I'm a little afraid to get my writing out there. I'm a little.
The stakes are high. The stakes are high.
I'm a little shy. Like I'm writing about this guy, and then these other guys are writing about the same guy. It's like, what do I?
We talk about those who made it. We don't talk about those who don't.
Exactly.
Jebediah didn't make it.
Oh,
Book of
come on,
Jebediah.
just let me get in at the end of the book. The last book is called Revelation, man, and we can't have anything after that. Come on.
Have you read like the apocryphal books at all or no? I feel like
I have not. Are they? Is it good reading?
I haven't read them either. Anyone here, if you're a Bible person, any apocryphal scholars and things like that? It's a cool name, like the apocryphal. Like it's like ooh, apocryphal. But
There's like a little tinge of like excitement to it.
yeah, because it's like
You
mysterious, right?
You good with the main 66,
Yeah.
but there's
Yeah.
there's an addendum.
So, poetry books. Assuming you're not adding to the Bible. It's never too late. I don't want to hurt your dreams, but this is a little challenging. I think first thing that you want to be considering when you're writing a collection or getting something together is trying to decide why do you want to write a book. I think that you should be aware of the reasons why you're trying to actually get a book, because I think you talk to some poets and they're like, man, I gotta get a book, I gotta do the book. It's just And then you ask them, okay, why you want the book? It's like, Kim says, man, I need a book. And the reason is just like, and then it's just like a circle. And writing a book just to write a book, I think is, to me, that makes me a little bit nervous, because to me that suggests that maybe we're not actually having a strategy for the book, and we're not having a game plan for the book, and we're not really sure about the direction we actually want this book to take once it's out. Because it's like, if the goal is just to write a book and then the book comes out, good job.
I'm done. You did it. On to my other life goals.
like why did we bring this book out into the world? You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, and I also I think that when you're thinking about writing a book, that process, because it's not going to really be a short process, right? So we're not dealing with like a short amount of time. And so if you are going into writing a book and you don't really have like a true north, this is why I'm writing the book, then like a quarter of the way through or midway through, you could like lose the connective thread that you're trying to connect, because there's not like focus there. There's just, I don't know what I want to do with this. I just want to get things out. And so now you might have a book that's kind of sectioned off and kind of has 10 different themes where you could have stuck with one or three, right? So yeah, really having that focus, or really kind of understanding the reason why you're going in, can help you re-reference that if you ever feel like, and it serves as a barometer, right? So now if you're thinking of, man, do I want to add this chapter in, or do I want to add this paragraph in, you can think about the goal that it's servicing, and you can be like, oh well, hold on, it doesn't serve that goal, so let me save it for another piece of content or something like that.
And I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily honest. Like, they say they want a book out, but
Said y'all lie. Everybody lies.
I think we lie to ourselves, guys.
Read the apocryphals. Do it now.
Like, I think that we tell ourselves that the goal is just to have the book out, but the reality is that we want to put the book out, and we want the book to do well.
Yeah.
By however we want to define that. That's a whole other thing. It's trying to determine that metric. And by not admitting that second half, I think it can lead to disappointment. And I think you see this, for instance, you can see it with events. Like, you plan an event and you tell yourself, oh, you know, I just want to do this event, and just, that's enough for me. Or like you make something and it's like, oh, if I make one person happy, that's enough. You know what I mean? And like, it's like that feel good story that I think some people tell themselves, but then they do their thing. One person buys their book. One person comes out to their event, and I think the question is, are you actually happy? Because that one person came and they enjoyed it.
Yeah, and pardon me. I think like that's one of the things that for both when it comes to the poets, event planners, like people in other industries, chefs, anything, like setting a realistic expectation for where you are. And okay, so maybe we might be, because if we're doing 5, maybe this should be another number. So I'll get a little bit more into this maybe in one of the other ones. But yeah, just kind of having that realistic focus will really help you be really specific with the expectations that come afterwards, or with the expectations that you have for what comes afterwards. Mm-hmm. But I'll elaborate more on that on another one.
I'll give you space. What is that second point you're thinking?
Kind of not setting realistic expectations for who you are and what your book is right now, and setting realistic expectations for what success is and what you'll have to do to drive success. And kind of, it's kind of what I mean by that. So if you are Kanye West, right? So let's just pull a name out of here. Kanye West.
Kanye would just pull a name out.
Yeah. Kanye. So if you're Kanye West, if you wrote a book and you just put it out, you put it on Instagram and you just said, hey, I wrote this book, everybody buy this book. Your barometer for success is probably really like, it's incredibly high for me and you, right? For anybody that's like for us here, because without any effort, seemingly without any effort, which I would make the argument that the effort came the 3 decades prior, him like just kind of building up a reputation and stuff like that. But I'm saying, as far as like in the immediacy, what it seems like zero, very minimal effort if he just put it on Twitter, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, just said, hey, releasing a book, everybody go buy it. I'm telling you the truth about life, or whatever like that. Like, as soon as that tweet or social media message goes out, it's going to be on blogs, it's going to be on a website, because like people are going to feed into that. People are going to want to tell stories about what they see in the book, what they found in the book. So there's going to be people that are going to kind of carry that story along with very minimal immediate effort from what we can see from the person who's pushing the content. Now for most of us though, so for most of the creatives out there, it's not going to be as simple as, hey, Instagram, I got a book out there, see you later. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's going to require a lot more work. And so if you're thinking that I'm going to sell 10,000 copies because I tweeted it out, and even if you're like, I'm going to sell 10,000 copies.
But I tweeted.
Yeah.
I tweeted.
And I think one of the things that I see a lot of creatives kind of going outside. And Jeff, we've talked about it on this show before. Yeah. Where you'll have 10,000 followers, like on, let's say on Twitter, 10,000 followers on Twitter. And so you're thinking that if I tweet this thing out, 10,000 people just heard about my book. And that's not true. Right? Depending on what the algorithm is doing, depending on the time of day, depending on how active any of your followers are, a much smaller amount of people more than likely saw that post. And even smaller amount of people are probably realistic buyers or realistic immediate buyers for your book. Right? So the act of, or the thinking that you have the numbers on your platform, and why that won't necessarily translate to just you being able to get those purchases, like that gap is one that you have to really understand prior to you thinking that this thing is just going to take off. Because a lot of times something taking off, from what you can see, is really a byproduct of a huge amount of work that somebody has done on the back end, and really what people do continuously. We talk about Dante a lot of times on this platform, and maybe this will be for another one, but we talk about Dante and his book like a lot of times on this platform, and one of the things that I see from him that he does fairly frequently is he's using the book to do other things, which is a sale for the book, right? And so now people can get invested and they can really appreciate the book and they want to really open it up and look more into it. So it's just to say there's so much more work associated with, promoting yourself and getting yourself out there, and for people to really believe the value and like buy into the value of the book that they're purchasing, than just you kind of putting it out there once or twice that, hey, it's out here, it's ready.
Breathing In and Out mentions you might sell one to your mom. 100% true.
I don't know. Your mom's like,
I don't know about my mom.
I don't know. I've known you for quite some time. You're not that wise. I'm okay.
But I think you touched on a couple things I want to just highlight. One of the things actually touches back on our first point, which is why are you creating the book? And when your purpose includes an actual strategy. So, for instance, a lot of times people write a book. A year later, what are they doing with the book? It's kind of gotten forgotten. Not even really pushing the book anymore. But that's still, only like 0.001% of the population even knows you have a book out. So that still means that there's, even if you're just tapping into like the U.S. market, that's still 300 million people that don't know who you are. That book could speak to. It's like having a consistent strategy and understanding. Actively seeking out the audiences for your work and who will benefit from your work is something. The other thing is you mentioned, you brought up the example of Kanye and things like that. To bring it to poetry, I think of Rupi Kaur, who is one of the few poets who, if she announces that she's going to do a reading, she can fill a 2,000 seat auditorium. I don't care how you feel about her work. She can literally fill a 2,000 seat auditorium of people who want to hear her read, but, and you might think that's a lot of people, but then also consider, she's, in terms of poetry, she's about as household a name as you can get nowadays. So we have to imagine that she comes to your city, she comes to New York, and she fills a 2,000 seat auditorium. But think of all the people who aren't there. It's 2,000, but how many people know she's there but aren't there? You know what I mean? Because she's probably reaching. She announces she's doing a reading there. She's probably reaching 100,000 people.
Yeah. Maybe more than that.
But more than that. So the reality is that she's reaching a lot of people. She's getting 2,000. But 2,000, in all honesty, is probably 1%.
Yeah,
more or less of the people.
Things got online for people.
So it's like I was just talking with Zach yesterday, actually, and this is something that we were discussing. That the biggest issue writers have is volume in terms of we're just not reaching people. You don't reach enough people. Because these big authors, when you're big name authors, like when your Neil Gaiman's of the world release a book, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that may not buy the book, but at least know that it's happening.
Yeah.
And that's the secret. Ultimately, is how do you get more people to know about it? And I think that's really, in terms of setting the expectations, that's the key. In general, if you're able to make a sale on somewhere between 1 to 10% of people that know about your thing, it's not a bad number.
Yeah, I used to do sales, my first big boy job when I was living by myself, right? So it was a sales position, right? and it was very terrible sales. By the way, it was a very terrible company, but it was so interesting because we would like your average rep would make anywhere between 150 and 400 calls a day, right? And if you got 2 sales out of that, that was like, yo, you're killing it, right? Because that's 10 sales a week, that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And you think about, how you think about how book sales work. You think about even like really anybody selling a product. I would even go so far when we're talking about like home sales, right? If you are, I mean, what's a rent whatever. Like if you are a
realtor?
Realtor. Oh, I was trying to say resell for some reason. If you're a realtor, right?
If you're a realtor.
It's been a long day.
It's
okay. If you're a realtor, right? You're typically putting your feelers out to a really, really large amount of people. But there's a considerably smaller amount of people that you're reaching out to that are in the position that are in the position even buy your home, let alone the want and the kind of the capacity to do so, right? And so you're not thinking, man, how do I, and the thing is, it's probably best if you can find out and dig into your specific market as much as possible. Great, right? So if you found out that, man, my poetry or my work really relates to single dads between 25 and 45, and somehow you were able to you were able to really pull a lever and get those people really bought in, and those people kind of coming in both through the algorithm and maybe just from the physical spaces that you're able to go. That's the best. That's like the best case scenario, because you're not wasting energy spaces that you might not really be super successful. But until you're able to really kind of corner that and really kind of chisel that down, then it's going to be a numbers game. It's going to be, I don't know who all, and the thing is, like, you should maybe have a plan of action, kind of who you think your poetry is speaking to. But aside from that, you should really be thinking about, man, how do I get my work in front of as many people as possible?
No secret with that. I want to touch on a point from Breathing In and Out. Thank you, by the way, for hanging out with us tonight. Haven't touched on this yet. Luck. You can be a marketing genius and not sell any. On the other hand, you could have a poem go viral and then sell some books, but going viral with a poem is rare. I think this brings up the concept of going viral. Would you rather have something go viral that reaches viral for like you? Okay, so like let's say 100,000. Let's say you have a poem that reaches 100,000 people. Or would you rather be able to consistently over 10 posts, let's say over, it's like one thing that gets 100,000 or 10 that gets 10,000?
I think maybe the question that I would have is, because you're increasing the volume of one of those, like what happens in the posts,
like for the posts around it,
around
let's say one. Everything else is flatlines. It's a real anomaly, just flat, and then jump, and then it stays, and then it returns back to the mean.
Oh, so I mean, I would if we're saying that after the 100,000 it returns back to the mean, I would prefer the 10,000 each for 10 posts. But I guess my question is, what happens after the 10 posts?
That's for sure. The point I want to get at is that I think a lot of time, I think for a lot of people, going viral is not the desirable thing. I think it can be helpful, but I think I would much rather have the slow, consistent grind, because I think the slow, consistent allows you to develop deeper relationships.
For sure.
And we talked about this before, where you know, the first time people see you, there's still a lot of suspicion. There's a lot of people don't know how to feel about you just yet. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so it takes time to develop that relationships. They say, you know, you need, in general, it takes like 5 interactions. It takes, Google's track that you, before people buy things, they need like 7 touch points. And another thing we talked about is, in general, if you see people in 4 different locations, these are things that can kind of allow people to start breaking away from associating you as an acquaintance and more actually developing like friendship and things like that, or people feel that way. I mean, a lot of times we're talking about parasocial friendships, where it's very one-sided. So I think that by having those multiple interactions on a smaller scale, if I'm consistently getting 10,000 or 1,000 or 100, if I'm getting like the same number on posts, that in general suggests that you have an audience that's coming back to you for the same thing over and over again. In general, it's not always going to be the same 100, but like, or the same 1,000 or the same, but like in general, you're getting a lot of returners. Whereas when you get the viral thing, that's generally a lot of new people, which can be helpful for generating leads, but a lot of times that relationship kind of stalls out. So trying to hold on to that can be really tricky. So again, nice if it happens. Also, I would say that prep for it. Don't assume it's going to happen, but also prep for it. So if it does go viral, and I think this kind of touches on your point, having something that other people can turn to that's similar enough. The worst thing that can happen to you is you start, let's say, like, I'll keep it related to poetry. Let's say that you want to be known for poetry for, hello to Joshua Roses checking in. Good to see you. Let's say that you want to be known for the dad. I write a lot of dad poems, so I'll do that. Like, you want to be known for the dad poems, but then I get the one random poem that's about, what could we talk about? The one poem that's about my hatred for organized religion. I don't know where this is going. I don't have to say.
I was crusading against the crusade.
I was reading the apocryphal text.
I said, hey, this guy's got a point. Get him in there.
You know, and it's like, that's not what I want to be known for. You know, so now I get this, and so, but that's the one that goes back, because you don't always control it. It's like, no, I want the other poems. I like the other poems more. Yeah. Why are you guys liking this one? So because of my lack of consistency, I'm now getting punished for, and you see this, like, for instance, on YouTube. We see that on YouTube channels where, you know, my channel is about education. Oh, here's a video of my dog. Oh, well, now my page is about dogs. well, that's the thing, because then you have to make the decision. Do I pivot? Am I now a dog channel? Or do I stick with that? Like, and that sort of questioning should never even enter your mind. Like, it should never even come to that point. You know what I mean? So we have to be careful with going viral. If you go viral, make sure that you have, as best you can, have things that people that find you for that viral thing can turn to other things that are also similar to kind of develop that relationship more.
For sure. I think one of the things that I kind of get brought to, it's a couple years ago. So there's a little bit of a backstory. So my wife does these like clay mask things for her hair. If you're a black woman, maybe you know about this, but she does this like clay mask thing for her hair from time to time. And she was doing it, and she had her kind of hair up in like this like bun, and it was just like really slick back. And I was like, I sent her this text message, right? And I say, oh, you want to be Rosa Parks so bad. And then she tweets it, right? So she tweets it. She's like just making fun of the fact that I was making fun of her, right? And it goes like, it like blow. I think to this day, it's still the most shared thing she's had on her platform. It got like 200,000. Like it was crazy. Like people like the Shade Room shared it. It gets still randomly every now and again somebody will share it to their page. There'll be like black hair pages, there'll be like black love pages, all this stuff. Like people will be sharing this content over and over and over again. Like again, I think a couple weeks ago, like it just like somebody tagged us. Oh, that's Matt and Ajane. Look what y'all did. So it's like it'll always happen. But the thing is like that kind of content is not the thing that Ajane that's not even Ajane, right? So like it's Ajane was like talking about a joke that happened. Like really, the whole post was about the kind of the relationship dynamic there, but that's not her necessary content, right? She's like a poet.
She's a clay masquerade.
right.
She's the Rosa Parks one.
She could have pivoted into like hair care, right? Like that could have been an easy pivot for somebody. Like a lot of people might have made that decision, like, oh, I can just pivot into hair care. Like, you know what I mean? It's still kind of trying to do, but I'm like her passion, her life's work is not hair care stuff. Her passion, her life's work is poetry.
Yeah.
So the fact, like she was just like, yeah, like this is crazy and I'm getting a ton of followers, but these aren't the people that are going to necessarily be there for my, launch party, be there for my book release and stuff like that. And those are the kind of decisions. I mean, it's never, again, the post itself wasn't necessarily negative towards her image because it was something funny. Like, you know what I mean? Kind of relationship dynamic thing. So it wasn't something necessary. It wasn't anything negative.
But it's not really contributing.
If she would have leaned, I think public image wise, it felt personable. So like, even the people that like, there's plenty of poets that were sharing it and commenting and stuff, like having interactions. I actually think the primary interactions, if you go to the post, underneath that were really like, devoted to the interactions, were people that were like that knew Ajane and that knew us and were like, they were making little other memes of her, like they would put her on the bus. Like it was wild, man. It was a really wild time. And so like but those interactions were mostly poets, right? Those interactions, because Ajane's like primary followership is poets. So it's just to say that, like, that dynamic, I wouldn't say that it wasn't helpful, because I do think that there was something to it that was, like, endearing, that people really enjoyed. And so that even if you came there thinking, oh, this is just, because I don't know that I would think anybody's coming there for hair care, but I would just say that there's people that do hair care stuff for a living that would look at a post like that, like, oh, this is something I want to key in on. You know what I mean? But it wasn't something that if she would have leaned into that, it would have detracted from the work that the primary work she does. So it's not a bad idea to have stuff like that. Like I don't think that it's ever a bad idea for any one thing to go viral. I think that if you don't get back to being on message fairly quickly, and kind of just pushing yourself like that, because like the algorithm will still just start pushing people towards you, you know what I mean, for at least for a little while. And maybe it depends on like the kind of people that you really want, but a lot of people, they might come there for, oh, that's super funny, oh, you do this, oh, you do this, like let me say around. So that's always a possibility. But yeah, you typically want to get back on message, or at the very least kind of redirect people to, hey y'all, this is cool, check me out here if you want to see more, whatever, like, just small stuff like that.
I mean, I think one thing you see, I'll apply it to YouTube. Something that you see a lot is when you're thinking of your video strategy, having a mix of, your education, having a mix of, like, that might be like your primary focus.
Yeah.
Then like maybe like a 30% will be towards community. It's like deepening your relationship with people that already like familiar with you, and then 10% being a little bit more experimental or like broad reach, things that have a greater potential for going viral but still staying connected to what you're doing. Bella asks us, she's going in on it. She is saying, speak to if someone goes viral negatively. I think there's like some psychological components to this, because I think it can cause frustration. Like if you've crafted a platform dedicated to a certain topic, and you've spent hours. How many times have we seen like this? Like being like, something. I spent hours, days, weeks on this project for it to only get 10 views, and then the 5 minute video about my cat is now getting.
Yeah, and Bella, can you maybe expound on what you mean? Because I think I what you mean by viral negatively. Like, do you mean viral negatively as in like it was something that you didn't want to go viral and that's the thing that goes viral, or do you mean like all of a sudden you're in the media, like you're being attacked or something like that for something that maybe you said or did or something like that? Because I think the latter is probably something that's like it kind of depends. There is this relationship guru. It happened this, I think it was a couple years ago, but there's like this relationship guru that was like really, really big, and he was like, he did these, I can't remember his name, but he always used to do these videos where he was like sitting in the car and he's like talking to the audience like through essentially like with his phone camera, but he's just like, sitting in his car and he's giving all this relationship advice, and it's typically, telling women leave that man or telling women like all this. So, and then like out of nowhere, we found out that he was married. And the way that we found out he was married is because he was like heavy deal cheating on his wife for a very long time, which is something that was like, it was ironic because it was like, he's a relationship guru that would not put his marriage as like a selling point for his message. You know what I mean? So I'm like, you got to wonder what's happening there. Yeah. And then, well, I mean, and depending on, I could see kind of both sides of that, but now you're going viral. Like he was going viral all the time already, but this time he was going majorly viral, but he was going majorly, yeah. But this time he was going majorly viral because what was happening was so antithetical to what he does and his content. And he released books, and he had product on the market that was like pretty much dead in the water because you're not going to take relationship advice from a relationship guru who is cheating on his wife for years, right? Or a relationship guru that you didn't know was married. So, yeah, as far as that is concerned, I mean, you kind of reap what you sow in that regard. It's really hard to be like, well, how do you kind of react to, and again, it could be, you could be getting media attention for a lot worse than that too. So I don't know if you have any advice for that, but
I don't. I mean, I think that's just the danger of even just putting things online. Like it kind of just comes with the territory. For me, again, it's even just like I think it can frustrate people. I think it can frustrate at best. I think it can cause people to get discouraged at worst, because it's like, man, maybe it's not even worth continuing doing it. You know what I mean? Like, people aren't liking this, and they're obviously liking this other thing. So, I don't know. It can be a wake up call to you. But I think it's hard when you've put a lot of energy and focus into one thing and to not see it perform, and then to see something else come in is, that's hard, Yeah. But I think this touches on also the next thing. So the idea, as Breathing In and Breathing Out says, that there's no such thing as bad press. I think in general there's something to it, but I don't it's not something I would actively be. I personally am not actively trying to do things to get negative attention in order to drive attention.
Oh, okay. There's two things to that, in my opinion. So here's the thing: you have to understand your value to the market, and what I mean by that is don't overestimate how much somebody can really truly dislike or even hate you and still come back later on. Because let's say you're the you're like a top tier shoe designer, right? Like your your shoe designs are like, as soon as they come out, everybody wants them because they're just beautiful. Everybody wants these shoe designs.
Are we getting to a Kanye example again?
I wasn't even going Kanye. I was going. I was actually thinking about. Okay. See how Kanye gets into their. We'll go with the Kanye example after this, but so like, let's say you're just a really great shoe designer, and then you do something crazy or you say something, and then now
because this sounds a lot like
I wasn't. I legitimately, this is just an example. So, but which is, let's go Kanye example. Okay, all right, fine, Jeff. All right, so let's say again, let's say you're Kanye West, and you're like, because I also think that like Kanye is talented. Kanye as a person is talented enough to where he can do this. This is pretty much his album release cycle, right? He's legitimately says things or does things that make a huge amount of people hate him, but like, he has this line. He's like, "I'm the person that you love to hate, but can't because you love what I make." It's like that tension can really drive sales, at the very least, is going to drive attention, right? So like most people aren't apathetic towards Kanye. They're either really, really love him, they're really, really great fans, or they hate him. And they're going to have to figure out and talk about the things that he's doing because they really, really just dislike him. So which is just say, like, I think that a lot of times that tension can be good. But again, it's like, are you Kanye West? That is, and when I say that, I'm not saying are you literally Kanye West. I'm saying that like, is what you're doing so revolutionary or so good, or do you have an audience of people that believe that about you, that you think, hey, there's like a recovery that can happen? Because I'm sure that if you did, then you could actually do things around that. Like, let's take not Kanye West. Let's take Jay-Z and Beyonce, for example. Like, I think, so a couple years ago, there was this run where Beyonce dropped Lemonade. Lemonade was a really transcendent, should have won album of the year. We don't got to get into it. Everybody knows it. So Beyonce drops Lemonade, and a really heavy theme in Lemonade was Jay-Z's infidelity, right? And that was a kind of the main talking point. It was a beautiful album, right? But it was like the main talking point was this like kind of Phoenix rebirth cycle, kind of strong, powerful, I'm powerful by myself. I don't need you. All those kind of things, those kind of running themes with, that content. And then afterwards, Jay-Z released 444, and 444 was that some of the heavy themes of it is like Jay-Z talking about like, just this woefulness, being sorry for that. He was still doing a lot. I mean, he was still Jay-Z, right? But he talked about that in the album. Like, for all we know, that never happened. I talk about this a lot. Like, I'm like, for all we know, that never happened.
Oh man,
but
put on your hats, guys.
That's not even that big of a conspiracy. Like, I feel like that's not even like, oh man, if you think that's a conspiracy, if you I'm just saying that, like, I think that it's something that is contentious, that creates attention, that now it's like you wanted to hear what Beyonce had to say, absolutely, and then like now you're like, what is Jay-Z gonna say? Right. What's gonna happen here? And it's just bringing you to that album. Like, people have that embedded in their rollouts all the time, where they'll be involved in a lot of drama. Either they'll be on the good side of the drama, but it's actually, I would make the argument that it's more enticing to the general viewer for you to be on the negative side of the content, or for the perceived negative,
or
side.
If there's sides to pick, just in general. Yeah, because I think that sort of tension. Yeah, and I mean, Beyonce and Jay-Z. I mean, these are two very, very media savvy people.
Like, think about this: if if the thinking was it could have hurt their careers, do you think we would even know?
Yeah, why was it? Why make it? It didn't have to be
Even yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Public. And
yeah,
things.
like even and because it was. And here's the weird here, and here's like the weird dynamic. Beyonce is going on tour, and when she's going on tour performing the album, she's doing nothing but like every single opportunity, she's like professing her love for Jay-Z. Like, think about the juxtaposition. Think about you're there. Everybody's there to be mad at Jay-Z, and Beyonce's like my beautiful, loving husband.
People are digging in. Jay-Z. People are digging in. I'm just saying.
And so it's just like that's like that's the tension that you create, and I'm like,
Will Smith and Chris Rock.
What was that?
Will Smith and Chris Rock. See?
That here's the only thing I would say. Here's the only thing I would say about
this
that.
show's going very different than I thought it would.
Well, no, because it's all about it's like again, those guys are high enough on the food chain to where a stunt like that maybe could have worked, except for I think that Will Smith building up the image of being Will Smith, like if it was a media stunt, it was unsuccessful because for about, I would say, 24 hours people were on Will Smith's side, and then for the rest of time people were against and it's like not even necessarily saying that Will Smith is like doing poorly, like he's not, right? But he has like he can't go to he can't have like cinema entered in for the Academy for like 10 years, so he's like on a decade-long break. Or I mean, he's still working on movies, but it's like his movies won't be considered. You know what I mean? So it's like he can't win. So it's like, man, that sucks. And so now it's like if you're a director who's like, I would cast Will Smith. I would love to cast Will Smith in this role or that role, but like I'm kind of excluding my work from the Academy. Do I want to cast Will Smith? And so there's that. There is, I think, the public image. I think there's been so many stories since, because it's really kind of dealing with him and his wife's relationship, and I think it made people dig into that a lot more than I would imagine is comfortable. And the things that are attached to it are not doing successfully. Like Chris Rock, I mean, I don't think Chris Rock is doing poorly, but I don't think that the stand up that he did after that did particularly well. You have, I don't think Jada's book did particularly well. I think Will Smith is still Will Smith. All these celebrities are incredibly rich and incredibly successful in their own right. So like nothing is taken away from that. But
I'm gonna bring us back to
okay. So it's just to say, when it comes to like your book, or when it comes to like this like content, or like kind of going negatively, like going viral, but like negatively, it's like it's like there has to be, just like we were talking about when we were talking about picking sides, or like it has to be some kind of value there, and like the execution has to be there. But I think it could be executed. Like I think as a long-term plan, you could execute that over and over again.
It's not it's not easy to bank on, like, oh, this is going to go viral, but it could be something.
Depending on the level that you're at. If you're like, I mean, well, I guess, yeah, I mean, you're right, because like if you're like, at this level, it's like really hard to decipher what's going to go viral. Now, if you're like Kai Cenat or, Mark Phillips, like, you know what I'm saying, you could probably a lot easier, in a much easier fashion, kind of predict those things.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that we brought up the topic of sides, and I think from just to kind of tie this to marketing a little bit, a lot of times we pay a lot of attention to, we talk about what we make is for, whether it's our art, our book, and things like that. We talk about our own goals, but another equally powerful strategy is deciding who you're against, creating an enemy. For instance, like Chris Do gives the example of a commercial he saw talking about soap. And there's this commercial, and I'm probably going to butcher this because I haven't actually seen the commercial, but apparently there's this commercial of like this guy that's like in the forest who like takes like this plate and like stares at the screen and is like, "You're not a dish," and like he throws the dish against the tree and the dish like just shatters, and it's like, wait, what? But and then the guy goes on to say, but like these soap companies treat you like a dish, like, and like just like starts naming like all these chemicals that like these soap companies throw into their soap products, and like treating it like they're basically making an argument they're treating you when they make their soap like you're a dish and like dish detergent and stuff like that. And this is like, no, like soap shouldn't have this stuff. And so one of the things that they do in that commercial is then they label the enemy as Big Soap. So it's like, stay away from Big Soap. Which is, so it works.
I just want to protest.
Because like, you know, because it conjures up, you know, like big pharma or like big tech and things like that. So like, it's like you hear the word big and then you make the association and it bigs up this negative. And there is no real thing as Big Soap. Like, Big Soap's not a thing, but they've made one.
He sounds like he works for Big Soap.
Big Soap doesn't exist. Big Soap
is like a dawn. It just comes and just have to hide it really quickly.
And yeah, so like if you had to create an enemy for your book, this is a popular, like once you actually start like looking at it, like probably with the easiest example is you look at like those Apple commercials from like the early 2000s, like Apple versus PC, where it's like the PC could technically do a lot more things than Apple could. But how did Apple approach it? They approached it as like, no, like computers are like slow and bulky and not cool and things like that. So they're
weird. I always thought that the guy playing PC, I thought it was an alright guy.
He was
I actually thought Apple was kind of smug. I'm like, why
are you
so chill all the time?
No, but
tense up a little bit. Wear a suit.
So that emotion, but that also kind of ties in. Actually, ironically or not, like that also ties into the emotional value, right? Because some people also won't like Apple for those sorts of things. It's like, you know, so it's like we can't make something that's for everybody. When you're making your book,
Right.
Your book can't be for everybody. Someone has to look at your book and hate it. It's good for your book to get the 1-star reviews and 2-star reviews, just as it's good for your book to get, you know, the 5-star reviews and the 4-star reviews, you know.
Like look over the 1-star review. Finally,
like
finally,
it's
this guy hates it.
You know, like 1-star reviews are actually really, really powerful because 1-star reviews mean that you were able to create something that engendered so much emotion in another person. You know, oftentimes because that's also a sign that they wanted something from your work and they didn't get it, you know, like there was an expectation that was unmet versus like a 3-star review is sometimes kind of hard to read, you know, because it's kind of relatively neutral. Whereas like a 1-star review is like there's a greater level of like passion and energy behind it.
I also think like the 1-star reviews or the 5-star reviews, I think that so for a lot of products that you see online, you're gonna get like you might get an average that's like the 3-star, but most of them are gonna be on the either end of those spectrums, and it's for the same reason that if you do or don't like somebody, they're gonna know. If you're neutral towards somebody, they might feel a little bit ambiguous about it because it's like you're saying something, and so you're taking the time to write this review and. So whatever, just like what you're saying, whatever that emotion or that feeling that it is that made you write it, like that's valuable regardless of it's positive or negative.
Yeah. Like we talked about this before. A big concept that I really believe in from Seth Godin is that we want to create work that's remarkable. Remarkable not meaning good or great or high quality even necessarily. Remarkable in that it creates a remark from other people. Because if we're the only ones sharing our work's never going to grow. The only way your work really grows is when other people tell other people about what you have or what you did or your product without you in the room. That's how you get something to grow. So the question is, how do you create something that is remarkable? Because that's the key. That's how things go viral.
Yeah.
You know, that's
both sides of that.
All right. How many questions have we done? I said we were going to do 5, and so we'll just do a quick recap. So the first question we had that I need you to ask yourself, if you're writing a poetry book or a poetry collection, the first thing we said is, what is the goal? Why are you even writing the book in the first place? Second goal we had is, what are your expectations, and are your expectations realistic? Kind of a 2-parter for that. We've done 2. Man, this is we're
doing a great job, guys.
Gotta wrap this up a little bit. My God,
we're doing a good.
All right,
it's my first day.
Okay, the third thing I'm going to say, you need to decide, how do you want it formatted. A lot of poets. A couple thoughts on this. Okay, so first things first. For a poet, I'm just going to speak to that because this is what I have the most experience with, poetry. First collections often have a lot of weight attached to them. You can see that just by the number of competitions that are only open to first collections. You see a lot of people, when they're, for instance, getting their MFAs, a lot of MFA students, what they're doing, they're trying to turn their thesis into their first book. There's a lot of kind of weight and pressure applied to first books. You only get one first book. So what a lot of poets do is, that's one of the reasons why a lot of poets turn to contests, because we mentioned earlier,
yeah,
a lot of poets don't have great reach. They don't really have a great audience. So how do you compensate for that? Well, you apply to a contest, because you do a contest. A lot of times the journals are doing the contests. They may have a readership of 10,000, 10 to 50,000 readers, potentially. So it's like, it almost feels like a cheat code. If I win this contest, I automatically get my book into the hands of this many people. So that's one of the attractions for contests. I think that can also be a negative, because it's like almost, I don't know, like kind of like getting a ride in like a self-driving car, but never learning how to drive your entire, like you're never learning the basics. You're never actually learning how to drive. So then if something goes wrong, you're like, I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean?
Like next 100 years.
It's facts. No, I mean, that's a whole other thing. It's probably going to be illegal to drive at some point. Insurance companies probably won't let you. He works in insurance.
I don't know. I don't know if that makes you feel more comforted or less comforted. Leave me a 1 or 5-star review so I know.
Right, let us know how you feel about that. Yeah. So you never actually learn how to do marketing. You never really learn how to do promotion. You never really learn how to expand your reach. You're just kind of applying the Band-Aid. You hope that their credential is enough to elevate you for the next time, you know, but you never actually learn the basics of, you never really learn to take your writing as a business, because what do businesses have to do? A business has to make a profit, but it has to find clients.
Yeah,
you literally have to find clients. If you can't find clients, you're gonna go out of business. Like so you just never learn how to do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what, you know, I mean, I know there's episodes and episodes of us kind of talking about this, about like grants and things like that, which is just to say, I don't think that there's an issue necessarily.
There's not a problem
for grants, right?
There's not a problem with it.
But I do think that, like, you applying for grants should be something that is like in addition to like the heavy work that you're doing to try to put yourself out there and get your work out there. Because if all you're doing is applying for grants and hoping that funds you, like, that's going to be, you know, it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be growth. It's just going to be, you're being buoyed by, you know, these grants. But if now, imagine if you're doing some incredibly hard work to put yourself out there, to to get your work in front of as many people as possible, and then you just got an infusion of $5,000, like that's gonna take your place. This is gonna take you crazy places. So yeah, you should really be searching for these opportunities to push things yourself, and then having these grants kind of serve as like an accelerant.
Like, I feel like if you have a project in mind, but you can't do the project without the grant, I feel like it's a problem.
For sure.
The grant should make it easier. The grant should up the scale of it. But, like, I feel like, can we get a working model that can exist without the grant? So that way, because, like, I'm doing this with you or without you. I would love to collaborate with you. If you want to help fund me and I'll give you the shout outs and things like that, cool. Yeah. But I'm doing this. I'm in some way, some form, this is happening regardless.
And a lot of grants won't even necessarily, like a lot of a lot of the funders, they'll look at your body of work. And I was actually telling this, like in my capacity as like a photographer, when people would, there's the GCAC, and like there's people that were like, man, I really wanted to get this grant, but I didn't get the grant, and I'm so devastated or frustrated. I don't understand why, or why I didn't get the grant. I really wanted to do this, but I gotta wait until next year to try to apply for the grant here, try to apply for it. Like, that's the problem right there, because you don't have a body of work that even suggests that without them intervening or stepping in, that you would even encounter this work or kind of approach this work. So yeah, you should. And also it's like it's also kind of it kind of informs like your passion about a project as well. Because like, man, I have about 10 different scripts in my head right now, like not even in my head, like that are written down and are ready to go as soon as I have the time. Like, I'm working on 2 of them right now, but all of them will eventually get done and more will be done, right? But it's really just about, hey, if I had the time, if I had this much money, I could get it done in 2 months. As it is, it'll be done in 6 months. And so that's how you have to look at your work. That's how you have to look at those things. Because this is exactly what you said. It's like, if there's no inkling that you could get this done, or you would even want to do it without the grant, then why would anybody fund it?
Yeah. Like, and I think also it puts you in position for things like earlier, I think it was Breathing In and Out. They mentioned luck. You can create luck. You can put yourselves in a position to be lucky. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like I'm really working on putting myself in a mindset, like a mindset of abundance, like an abundance mindset, versus a poverty mindset.
Let's talk about it.
Like, I want that attitude that, like, if I need, oh, that's turned off because we're using a different mic today, like, so we don't have our class. But like, if I need to make $10 tomorrow, I will find a way to make $10 tomorrow. Money is something that, if I need it to happen, I can find ways to make it happen. I don't like having the mentality that money is scarce, and if I run out, I'm never going to be able to get it back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good way to think about, I think, life in general. And I think if you are doing any one thing for long enough, then, you start developing, especially if you've seen some successes and you've seen some things. But again, in order to see those successes, it's like, you got to stick with it. You got to be persistent. You have to really be pushing yourself towards it. And so, yeah, if you're doing that for long enough, and you're doing the things that would kind of coordinate those successes, then you start, one of the things you start realizing is that, there's people that are out there that, and at one time you might have been one of those people, right? You might have been one of those people that looked at other people getting these opportunities and be like, man, they're so lucky. Man, they like, they just like them more. They just this, that, like, man, they just like, and so you might have been one of those people. And then when you put the work in and you're really pushing yourself, and like, we're each respectively, doing that in like different aspects. So it's like, once you see that, oh, like the reason why people were getting these opportunities, the reason why, you might think, oh, I'm a better candidate for this thing, but this person got it. Like, oh, but it turns out that this person has a decade worth of work history, them just trying things, them just trying to put themselves out there, made them kind of, speaking extemporaneously and doing this or doing that.
Yeah.
And then somebody was like, I see your work that you're doing. I want to pour some gasoline on it and really get this thing going. Right. And so, like, that's kind of like the everything. That's what everything is kind of, braced on. It's like, hey, are you willing to really put yourself out there and push yourself? And then, because if you are, then the opportunities are there for those people.
100%.
Speaking of another opportunity, we don't talk about it right now, but it's an opportunity that because we put ourselves out there, we're getting it. Yeah. Look, it just literally just happened, but I will talk about it later on. But
I want to talk about formats. We talked a little bit about contests and things like that, which can be helpful. Contests typically also give you a physical book. Depending on a contest, by the way, too, like the amount of copies you'll actually get is going to vary. Some contests, some are going to give you like 5 or 10 physical copies. Some will give you more. But that's something to be paying attention to if that's important to you when you're reading the guidelines for competitions. I want to talk about another strategy. This is a strategy I'm using for my main business that maybe will be helpful for people. I want to squeeze in this. I wrote a book. It's not a poetry book. So my first book actually isn't a poetry book. This is the...
Look at you.
So, like, I wrote about, hey.
We can't push the button.
I'll be fancy. I'm fancy. Yeah. So I wrote a book, but this is not a poetry book. It's how I'm doing it for my main business. So I have a teaching business for pronunciation. And so, but this might be a strategy that works for you because the formats I'm using for this. So this is self-published. This is another strategy you want to be thinking about. Do I want to self-publish? Keep in mind, if you're self-publishing, you're going to be responsible for pretty much all the work, Yeah. But also being realistic about expectations. So I'll try to highlight some of these things in like a 2-minute spiel. So this book is a manual for pronunciation because that's what I teach. How I made this book in this format maybe would be interesting for you. I did a series of live streams for basically about a month or 2 months, but they were strategic. Because every live stream, I was like, I know I want to make a book. I know I want to make a pronunciation book, which means I want it to sound, even when you're reading it, I want it to sound like spoken language.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to teach people how to talk. So like what I'm going to do, every live stream is going to be targeted, and I'm going to map out the 30 days or the 60 days or whatever. And I shot all the live streams. Okay, so they're on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel, that channel is monetized, so, I mean, it's not like it's like breaking the bank, but, okay, so people watch the videos, and I'm already getting a very small amount of income from just writing the book, right? So then, what the next step I did was, I took transcripts from the live streams, I compiled them. The transcripts, the formatting was a little bit off, so I went to ChatGPT, and I was like, okay, ChatGPT, add punctuation to this, remove the filler words. I'll do all the heavy editing, but I want you to at least format it to make it look solid. So I ran through ChatGPT. Then I edited it. Okay. And you had to buy an ISBN. So this is going to be available on Amazon. In addition to that, so there's going to be an audiobook component, because I'm taking the audio from the live streams. And the audiobook I'm going to sell on my own website because I want to have control over it. I don't want everything to go to Amazon. Okay. Amazon will get, I think it's 40% royalties on this book. I'll get 60. Okay. And yeah, so that's the format that I used for creating this. Now, I already also have 2 YouTube channels for pronunciation related things. So I already have a platform. I've already taught thousands of students. And so when this book comes out, I can reach out to people and say, hey, I got this book. I can also tell people, by the way, there's a free version because on my channel there's like a video book version of this for free. But if you also want to have a physical copy of something, you can do that too, you know?
Yeah.
So being accessible in different modes and things like that. But this is also, I've spent the last, because I started the channels and things like that, 2019, so this is a book that's coming out after, like 5-ish years of building a platform. All of this to say, if you're thinking of the self-publishing route, I don't know how many copies of this is going to sell. It'd be cool if it could sell anywhere between 50 to 100 copies within the first, I don't know, couple months. I don't know if it'll get that high. And that's with my audience that, subscribers-wise, we're looking at, I don't know, probably about 15,000. And that's just like YouTube, not including like the email list and other socials and things like that. Okay. So with all of that, and I'll keep you guys posted as it goes, my numbers, I need to see what the sales numbers are going to be. But I'm not expecting it to be like, in the thousands. And that's with several years of building an audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So going back to your own book, if you're self-publishing, be realistic about your expectations for sales, because if you're only talking to like 100 people and things like that, 2 sales, 5 sales, 10, maybe, you know what I mean? So the format you're choosing, if you're going to self-publishing, if you're doing contests and things like that, I think is really, really important to consider.
For sure. I think one of the things that I thought about when you were kind of elaborating here just now is I think one of the things that we a lot of times we do, as opposed to, because you talk about you've been doing this since 2019, and the thing that you've been doing since 2019 isn't appealing to your friends and loved ones and saying, oh, look what I do, like support the things that I do.
They're strangers.
Well, yeah, what you've been doing, you've been appealing to strangers, because you've been appealing to strangers who would be interested in what you're doing. And that is, I can't even tell you how important that is to creatives, because you're thinking, a lot of times creatives are thinking, my friends are going to come out and they're going to support me, and my friends, like if I tell my friend to bring 5 friends and those friends, everybody's together, and I'm like, that's not, that maybe gets you a show, right? So let's say if you're, and probably not, right? Probably not even a whole show. But like those are not the people that are your main supporters for strictly pragmatic reasons, right? So it's like, if you are a poet, let's say, and you're like, I really want to release my poetry book, what are the odds that you got born into a family of, let's say, 100 people that all just love poetry so much that they're like, I just need this book, regardless of if this is my nephew, right? So it's,
I
like,
would hate being in that family, by the way. But,
oh man, God,
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, like those are. Listen,
don't read my book.
They'll tell you to perform at the barbecue, but they're like,
but not that one.
You said it's $15. That's let me get you next time. But yeah, so it's just to say that, like, don't make your audience people that are like obligated to love you and cherish you. Like your audience are people that are strangers that have a genuine interest in the thing that you're providing in your product.
I've had poet friends get mad at me that I didn't like actively go to all their shows and stuff. Which is, that's not fair to your friends.
It's not fair.
Like your friends, don't get me wrong, they want to see you do well and stuff like that, but like expecting your friends to buy your books and go to all your shows and things like that, I think those are unrealistic at best and unfair at worst demands of your friends.
Yeah, just imagine like if I think a lot of my work deals with I would say kind of faith. And so like just imagine if as opposed to using like that as kind of like the backbone to a lot of my work, and I've performed in like faith spaces, and so I'll get booked at a church, or I'll just there's creative open mics that churches will have. So like taking my work there and then just letting things kind of splinter off from there. But like, yeah, if I was just like, yeah, hopefully Auntie wants to give me a $1,500 to perform a set or something like that, it's like, yeah, it's not gonna work. But yeah, just exactly what you said, like there's not enough time in the day, especially if you're in the poetry community, then you have dozens and upon dozens of friends who might be performers that might have shows. And I'm like, what, you're supposed to go to all those shows? Yeah. You're supposed to, be a supporter in that capacity in every single, way kind of possible. And it's going to be fairly impossible to do it. So yeah, just try to cultivate the audience that are genuinely invested.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's our third point. Let's try to run through two more, our last two, in the next 20 minutes or so. I think it's reasonable. Yeah. Matthias, what would you say is the next important question? So just to kind of recap, we're going through 5 questions that we think you need to consider when publishing a book of poetry. The first one was, what is the goal? Why are you writing this? The second one is, what are your expectations, and are those expectations realistic? The third one, which we just ran through, is what kind of format are you choosing? Are you self-publishing? You're doing traditional publishing? You're doing a contest? You're doing an audiobook? You're doing electronic? And why are you choosing that specific format? What are the advantages of it? What are the disadvantages of it? Number 4, Matthias.
I would say, how do you talk about your book? And we've talked about elevator pitches like a lot. Well, not maybe not a lot, but we have talked about it somewhat like throughout the course of like the podcast. And I think that is something that if you have a consistent kind of short and sweet but consistent elevator pitch for your book, it's going to help it, because again, not everybody that you run into that you're hoping to get your book in the hands of is going to be coming off of seeing your work on Instagram or seeing your work on YouTube or something like that. Maybe you're in a room full of I've been in like room full of creatives or like funders even that you're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to talk about your book, but you're trying to talk about your book in a way that's like, well, let's start. Poem number 1 is all about blah 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 blah. Poem number 2 is blah, blah, blah. Like you're not doing.
They're
that.
out. Like, they're out already.
Yeah, they're already out there. You have to figure out a way to really cohesively present and talk about this body of work. That way it entices somebody, it brings somebody in, and even if like I would say that for the people that is actually your audience, those are the people it's going to be a little bit easier to sell on. But you can even sell this to somebody who is they're just not coming to you, and you're like, man, how do I spike this person's interest? And this is how I would do it.
And be excited about it. It should go without saying, but like there's a lot of people who you'll see them talk about something that they make, and it's just like, oh well. I think a lot of times artists are just really dismissive of what they've done. I was like, oh, it's just this little thing I made about. Like, no. Like, I think it's helpful to have. I do it for Diverses. I do it for my main business. Like, having like a 3-second pitch or like a 3-word pitch, but then also having like a 10-second one. It's like a sentence long. So you have your quick one, and then you also have your slightly longer one. For when. The time is right. I think that's really key. And I think that's true for like anything, like for an event you're doing, for anything you're doing, because it conveys your sense of purpose in what you're doing. You're not just walking through life haphazardly. Like, no, there's intention and there's strategy behind this. What's up to Garage Poets Open Mic?
Yeah, Garage Poets Open Mic. You're still on Wednesdays, right? Am I mistaken?
Isn't it Mondays and Fridays?
Is it Mondays and Fridays?
We ask them every time.
I'm so sorry, Garage Poets Open Mic. Because I thought there was like one that happened when we were doing it. So maybe
they have there's an online one and then there's an in-person one. Garage Poets Open Mic, again, based in Boston. There's an online mic that you guys should be aware of. And there's also an in-person mic for those of you in Boston. If you could let us know again of what your times are, that would be great. Appreciate you.
Gotta make a trip.
Mondays and Fridays.
Wait, hold on. So Jeff was right in exactly, but I was right on average because I'm right in the middle. So I think that count. It feels like it feels like it counts for something. So
it counts for nothing. Absolutely.
I'm a poet, not a mathematician.
Wow. I think also being able to adjust how you talk about your book to different audiences is helpful.
Right.
Like, for instance, for this, if I'm talking about this, if I'm talking to people that know nothing about pronunciation, the way I'm going to talk about this is going to be very different than someone who studied pronunciation for like 10 years. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No,
so sure. I think knowing your audience, so for instance, if you go to a writer's conference, maybe it's a specific sort of writer. Like, if it's like a sci-fi writers conference, that's different than if it's like a poetry conference, or if it's like a poetry conference for kids, or like a writing thing for kids, So like really trying to cater it to the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
In a way that they can understand it. I would also say, I think it'd be really helpful to practice giving your pitch on video, to see what your body language is, to hear what your voice is doing, to see, are you doing a lot of filler words? There's a lot of markers that we use to show uncertainty in our speech. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, like a lot of like filler words. Rising intonation can show a lot of hesitation and doubt. Like if I talk like this, a lot of up talk, can show a lot of hesitation and can leave a bad sense. I think when you first meet someone, that first impression is so fundamental. You only get one shot at it. So like if you're, let's say you're even going to an open mic. Because let's imagine you're going to like a virtual open mic. Okay, let's imagine you're going to the Garage Poets Open Mic, which is online at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Wait, but hold on. Go to what he said after that. Go to what he said. Yeah. I averaged it perfectly. I told you. I knew it. Thank you so much. But definitely do not go there on Wednesdays because they will not be there.
You averaged it perfectly. However,
please do it on the Monday or the Friday. I'm begging you.
So, you go to the online open mic. One of the worst things you can do when you first start talking is to say, can you guys hear me okay? That's a horrible thing. Okay, it's the rising intonation, it's the doubt, it's the uncertainty. The very first thing you say in an online interaction or any interaction is super, super foundational. So I really recommend like a sharper falling intonation, sound firmer, a little bit more authoritative, a little stronger. Like, hi, my name is this. By the way, can you guys hear me okay? Like that is, even just doing that little step is a firmer thing. Practicing your pitch so that way when you're done sharing your poems, you can say, oh, by the way, guys, I have this collection that's about 3-second pitch. Thank you guys for listening. Move on.
Yeah.
And talk about it. Please, if you have something, talk about it. It's not just about how do you talk about your book, it's do you talk about your book?
Yeah.
It should be very apparent if you got a book and I go to your socials,
it should be very prominent.
I should know you have a book.
Let's say this. You should not be making your friends and your family like your primary audience, but nobody in your friends or family should not know that you have a book, right? Kind of expanding it out from there. Because I think a lot of times, you know what's weird? I think there is a negative connotation to trying hard. Mm-hmm. Or to a lot of times even trying. I think you had talked about it before, kind of poets downplaying things they did. But I think a lot of times people are downplaying it because there's they expect to be able to talk about their work very minimally, and for people to just be excited that this person has a book out that they should really want to get. And I'm like, there's not a lot of people that shouldn't be excited about their work and excited about what they do. Like, if you think about the fact that, like, Beyonce still talks about, like they're like when either she posting stuff, she has like stuff on the website or something like that. If Beyonce has an album out, like, it's everywhere and it's being talked about everywhere. And you can best believe like the entire Beyonce doing a stadium tour like around the country in multiple countries is Beyonce saying, "This album is amazing. Listen to the album." Yeah.
The big stars, Taylor, Beyonce.
Taylor what?
Molly.
Taylor Molly? Taylor, oh, never. Not familiar. Please do not attack this one. Okay, Taylor Swift. Wait, I forgot. Hey guys, I knew who he was talking about. That was a joke. This is not an opportunity. Do not attack this podcast. Oh, man. Diversus loves Taylor Swift. Okay? We're as afraid as the Beehive. Or we're at least okay with Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Nah, first of all, I rock with Beyonce. Behind me, we're like this. But hey, listen, Swifties out there. I'm telling you, I don't want to make you I know Jeff says make enemies. I don't want to make you an enemy. Okay, I want to get home safely. Like, can you imagine getting followed home by somebody blaring?
Let's not. People also mentioning about Fleetwood Scared Talker book because they don't want to come off pushy. 100%.
Yeah.
But the end result is people don't know. You don't have to you don't have to. How do I put this? Telling people about your book isn't trying to necessarily selling your book. Telling people about your book is just letting people know you have a book.
Yeah. Even because whenever you are I don't know if you guys watch talk shows or anything like that, but if anybody on that talk show and the political shows or anything like that, if they have a book, you can guarantee at some point they're in I actually say this in my book where I say, and then whatever the quote is, because it's your book should be something that you can reference, that you can talk about, and if you're I can't even describe the amount of times that you'll be at a poetry show, it'll be an open mic, and then somebody after the poetry show they'll be like, I remember this guy, he had 3 books, and he self-published, never said anything about the book while he was on stage. He didn't even read from the book, but actually he read a poem from the book. But he just he didn't read it. He memorized it. I'm like, what? No, make sure if that poem's good, I really want to know where it's from. And if you're holding a book and somebody's listening to a good poem and they're looking at your book and they're like, how do I make that poem enter my head through my eyes? That's how you're gonna sell.
Plus, they're just so bad at promoting themselves because there's such a negative connotation with it. But
do you think the way. No, I was gonna say, well,
you,
me. Do you think that it's more about just the thought of promoting things, it makes you kind of feel icky trying to sell things, or do you think that it's more centered around effort and it feels like a desperation as opposed to just what you do if you're trying to sell something. Because I think that's kind of a little bit of the connotation.
I think it's kind of tied in a little bit with both.
Okay.
One example that this is actually going to be, this ties into, let me give my last thing because I think it ties together. Ahead. So the last thing I would say is that how much are you? How do I phrase this? Because it's more of a statement, but I want to turn it into a question. I'm just gonna phrase it like this for now. and talk about. So my last one is, what is the importance of sales for your book? And I say it like this. I'm going to give an example from, again, Seth Godin, one I mentioned before. Seth Godin talks about beehives and how the goal of a beehive isn't to make honey. Honey is a byproduct of a healthy hive. I don't think the purpose of a book is to make you money. But I think a lot of poets approach it that way. They view the book as the income driver.
Yeah.
It's the end product. Everything has led up to the book. It's the culmination. When in reality, the book is not the culmination. The book is the floor on which you can build.
Oh, that's good.
The rest of the house. It's a part of your ecosystem. It's a fundamental part of the ecosystem, but it's a part of it. If the only thing you have to sell, or the only way that you can connect with your audience is the book, I would probably make an argument that's probably a failure on the writer, because there's so many other components involved with this. And so to tie back to what your point is, like, do I think that people feel icky about sales? We got rewinds are now in here. Joshua, I'll spare my thoughts on rewind. But I appreciate the sentiment.
That's why I threw my VHS out the window. Never do that.
I think because a lot of poets often view books as kind of like the end all be all, I think there can be that impression like, oh man, I have to sell the book because it's all I got. If I don't sell the book, I make nothing. It's literally all I got. And I think because a lot of poets aren't even thinking like, what else can I even sell? What else can I even do to make money from poetry if I don't have a book?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is false. There are other ways you can do it. So I think there's that, which can lead to desperation. Because it's like, if you're like, man, I really, really, really want to make money from my work or my art. The only way I can do that is my book. So now if I'm pushing my book, I feel like I'm being very salesy because it's the only tool I have. And so I feel like when I talk about it, I'm putting people in an uncomfortable position to buy it, and I don't like that feeling I have. I think the energy approach is wrong because people sense that. Because people sense the desperation. People tell when you're desperate. It's like the stories they talk about, like when you're single and you don't want to be single, how it can be hard to find someone. Whereas, like, some people, as soon as they enter a relationship, they find all these other opportunities. All of a sudden, it's like, man, what happened? Like, when I was, people can tell when you're desperate.
Yeah. And it's like, because it's kind of the difference between whether or not something is, like, a tool that you're using, or if it's, like, the thing that you built with your tools, right? So, and again, I mean, it goes back to the desperation play, because it goes back to this thought that, like, man, if you're working towards something, then that process that you're doing it within, it's like everything seems to fit, because it's like you're actually actively working towards these other goals, and maybe these other goals are things that you're really trying to press into. But if you're like, I'm working really, really diligently to get a hammer. It's like, man, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of the hammer now? Like, what is, like, you right? It's like what are all these things? So it's like, yeah, like, I think that a book is, and to be clear, like, I'm also, I think for years, one of the things that, like, and actually I think, like, kind of a lot of ways, like, talking with Jeff, but also a lot of ways, like, when just taking in content and taking in how books are perceived in media and how, like, they transition from, if you're a fiction writer, then kind of that next step, the next button to push is like, okay, how does this book transition into film, right? Or like that's kind of the play that a lot of people try to make, which is like typically really not typically, but when it's successful, it's like huge, right? But there's so many books that are adapted into, or so many movies that are adapted from books, because you have, again, I mean, one of the tenets is like you have to have an IP that there's an audience for. So now you shouldn't be looking at your book like, man, I just need to get it in your hands because I just need to be able to sell this book. It's like, man, if my goal is for this to be maybe if you're writing nonfiction and you're like, I really want this. I mean, there's poetry books that have been adapted into film as well. But if you're like, man, I really want this my book to be adapted into film, then your goal shouldn't just be getting just people, please buy this book. You should be trying to, like, I would say if you're a nonfiction writer, let's say you're a superhero, like your person's like around like some kind of science fiction kind of superhero, something like that. Like, okay, do you go to OhioCon? Do you go to Comic-Con? Do you go to these comic book festivals that are, overran with your demographic? These are people that you want.
The answer is yes, by the way, to all of those. It's not or. It's yes.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, are you going to these places? Are you trying to reach out to these specific audiences? Are you and again, trailing it back to number 4, when you go into these spaces, are you excited about your product? Are you excited about what you've done? Are you talking about it? Because again, people can kind of sense that, because now you're taking it from this, I just want to get into it, because like if you push something on somebody, they can take it and not really feel anything about it, especially if it's at a price point that they can feel okay with being like, I got this because I just want to be supportive of somebody, but I'm not really interested. But no, if you're passionate about it and you're like, hey, I want you to buy this, but I want you to buy it because you're interested in my characters. You're interested in the world that I build. Like, because I would much rather have 5 people buy my book that are genuinely interested and invested in my characters than 10 people or 15 or 20 people or even 100 people that bought my book just because it's like, yeah, this is what you do. You just buy books, and then you just because like, would I rather have 100 people that are letting my book just collect us somewhere, or 5 people that are going to be like online, oh my gosh, like, y'all have to check this out. You have to kind of talk about this. Yeah.
So a couple quick thoughts there.
Yeah. We
talk a lot about, I'm bringing in my business a lot, but I think there's a lot of relevant things. Garage Poets also brought up a good point I want to get into, but there are a couple of points we have to cover first, more related directly to questions. So, when I take on a new client, or I'll say a potential client schedules a call with me, and we're having our first call. My goal during that call is to not have them take more classes. My goal is to convince them that they don't need me, that they can do it on their own. There's videos online for free. There's other teachers who are cheaper. They don't even need to study. Again, I teach pronunciation. They don't need to study pronunciation. People still understand them. I asked them, oh, do you feel like people understand you most of the time when you talk? They're like, yeah. You don't need me.
Ironically enough, this is really similar to his parenting approach as well.
My 5-year-old doesn't need me.
Did you make the sandwich today by yourself? Get a job.
What happens next? They start selling me, to themselves. Because they're like, no, like, I've seen your videos. I like your approach. You do this. I want to do this with you. But I'm like, but you don't need me. It was like, no, but like, and the more that happens, where I'm not selling me, I'm trying to get rid of them. They're selling me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really good test. Okay, there's this episode of The Office, right? And if you don't know a lot about The Office about a paper company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, right? But it is fictional. Scranton, Pennsylvania exists, but
my mom's actually from there.
Oh, really?
Really?
Oh, nice.
It's exactly how they portray it.
You gotta go one day.
You don't have to. We don't have to.
But yeah, so it's about this paper. But and one of the a lot of the episodes is kind of just around sales because like the main, I would say, of the main 4 characters, 3 of them are like either salesmen or they were such a good salesman that they became a manager, right? And then one of the episodes, there's like this other really great salesman that had to figure out what they were doing, and that exact approach. But it's like it's a real life approach because like it happens all the time. Like we used to do it in sales.
Yeah.
Sometimes depending on the kind of client, what they would be receptive to. But essentially, you put them in a position where they're selling you on the prospect of working with you. So now it's like I'm not trying to get you to like I'm not gonna talk about my own job. In that job
for the second time, I'm not
gonna talk about it. But yeah, and in that space, it was like it wasn't. They were trying to sell paper, right? That's what they do. But he's like, I'm not gonna try to sell you paper. I'm gonna try to get you to sell me on why we should do business together. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I don't know because I do this, and we're kind of out here. Maybe we're not quite aligned because now what you have is a dynamic where they're solidifying in their minds all the reasons that they really want to buy from you. And so because they have, in order to sell somebody on something, like you have to repeat it to yourself.
But for this to work, it has to be genuine. I have to genuinely be okay. I really
want to get rid of it.
I have to genuinely be okay with not having you as a client. Because it's a burden. If I take you on as a student, now on my schedule, we have to book out a time. We have to meet consistently. I have to use my energy to listen to you and find out what the issues are and solve them. This is work. I don't want to work. You know? So there has to genuinely not be desperation. Because if you're desperate and you're trying to do it, people pick up on that.
For sure.
You know? So like you have to genuinely be okay with not selling your book. So for instance, which sounds ironic, but you have to be okay with not selling your book to sell your book. For instance, something you see at open mics. You know, sometimes open mics will have like a table where like you can like put your books and things like that.
Yeah.
I think if I were going to do that approach, there's something to be said about making it difficult to work with you. People like that. which is wild, but there's
Kathy, if you're watching this, he doesn't mean.
So like for instance, if I had a book to sell and I was going to open mic, I'm not bringing 10 copies of my books at open mic. I'm not doing it. I'm going to bring probably 2 or 3 copies. And I'm going to read my poem. Okay. And I'll say, hey, thanks. This is from these poems that I read tonight from my chapbook. If you're interested, I only have like 2 copies here. But if you're interested, hey, come talk to me. We can talk, you know, or something like that. You know, I had to come up with a better pitch than that. But the idea being that I got 2 copies. If you want one, cool. If you don't want one, cool. You know, but it's there.
You could also, I think what I see a lot is people making the purchasing of the book kind of like a small addition to the actual interaction that you want. So it's like, please talk to me. I'd love to talk about poems. Like, you know, I'm going to be here for a while after the show. Mm-hmm. I got a couple of my books here if you want to purchase one. But I mean, ultimately, you know, I accept, you know, hugs, conversation. I really just want to have an interaction with you, right? So now you're developing the purchase as something that's like,
you know what I would do?
And yeah,
I would, during the open mic, I would have a notebook. I would listen to everyone performing, and I would say at the end of it, I'd be like, yo guys, there were some lines I loved from everyone's poems. I would love to, if you performed that, I would love to talk to you about the line that struck with me, and I can show you. I wrote it down here. Talk to me at the show. So that way, it's praise. Like, oh, you heard my poem. There was a line you liked in my poem? Oh, all right. Like, I'm curious what line struck, you know? Like, it's not critique. It's just praise. and it's also a conversation starter because sometimes people don't know what to say to you after an open mic. Some people are like, "Oh, hey, good poem,"
Yeah.
and then it kind of dies there. Whereas this is like it gives them permission to enter into dialogue with you. And in that dialogue, my goal isn't even I might bring up the book, I might not bring up the book, or I might do it like at the end of my talk. You know, be like, "Hey guys, this is for my book. Oh, by the way, then I would mention the line thing. You know, it's like just make it aware that I have a book, but the bigger thing, genuinely, is I want to tell you about a line that you wrote that struck me. Something like that.
I could see that working.
What else was I gonna? There was another point I was gonna say related to all this, which was gonna change your lives dramatically.
No, your lives have to stay the same. So take that, life.
What is the importance of sales for your book? I think the last thing I'll say about this is that in writing, the book is. I think we have to approach it less as being the product, because let's be honest, the amount of sales for a book, your average book, how many copies does it sell? That number is really skewed because of like, you know, like the J.K. Rowlings and like the Neil Gaimans of the world, you know, but like most books are selling 2,000 copies, less. If it's self-publishing, it's probably in the hundreds. You know what I mean? So like, ain't no one's getting rich off of copies of books being sold. Okay. Yeah. So then why do we still do books? Well, books are entryways into so many other things. Books, for instance, for conferences, many conferences won't even let you present unless you have a book. Lots of talks won't even let you present if you don't have a book. The book is a business card, basically, for writers.
Yeah.
You know? And I think handling it from that perspective instead of as an income driver, I think can be really helpful. You know? And the fact that when we start viewing it as a business card and viewing it less as the end product, I think that can also be really liberating in how we handle our book, because we can start using the book as a marketing tool for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know? Being like special events. Maybe I'm going to give a couple copies out for free. You know what I mean? Or things like that. Maybe I'll give someone 2 copies. I'll be like, hey, give another copy to someone that you think would like it. You know? I think it really opens the door for other sorts of opportunities to be considering.
Yeah. And it's a very effort driven business card, right? So I don't want to. I think like a lot of times like we say the words business card, but like, and I to be clear, like Jeff understands this like a lot better than most people, right? So it's just like you're putting a lot of effort into the business card, but it's like it's what we talked about kind of in stage like I think it's like 1 or 2 where we were just talking about like there's so many opportunities kind of on the other side of the really large work that you're already doing. So yeah, maybe does it take you a while to write the book, especially if you really want to, if you really care about how it's received and you really put some real intention behind it, then it should probably take you a while, right, in order to kind of create it. But it's like what is that, like the Pareto distribution? It's like so many people are thinking that, you know, these people are just like lucky. But like, no, it's like if you are a person that's getting some of the opportunities, you're probably getting most, if not you know, most of the opportunities, right? But it's not because you know you're just the favorite. It's because once you have the book, then maybe you get this opportunity that you can put on the CV. So now you have this book and this opportunity that somebody's going to look at and they're going to say, oh, I want to book them because they have this and this. And now that thing just keeps building, but it's on the other side of all this hard work that kind of that helped you create the gap between you and a lot of other people. And that's kind of like the truth of it, as opposed to like, you know, people just being mad that, oh, this thing isn't evenly distributed. Oh, I wish that I got this. Like, this person, they already got this, that, and the third. I'm like, yeah, but the reason they're probably going to get the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th is because they're the people that get those things, because they've already done the work that's required to kind of get the car moving. And that's so much of the battle. So much of the battle is getting that thing moving. Once you get it moving, like, the amount of opportunities that you're going to have access to is going to be a lot greater.
It's like a rocket ship, right? Like, the amount of fuel it needs just for the initial launch is just like, you need fuel to carry the fuel, right?
I'm not a rocket scientist. Is that a lot?
I imagine it's like 3 cars.
Elon, if you're listening to, I call him Elon because we're on a first name basis. Elon, if you're listening to this, or if you're checking my Twitter, I'll tweet it out to you. Just let us know. Is that a lot of fuel? Is it? We'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Last thing I want to talk about. I know we've been going. It's been a long episode. Appreciate you guys being with us tonight.
Shout out to y'all, man.
But I wanted to touch on this point from Garage Poets Open Mic. What are some good examples of other avenues to connect with your audience? This goes back to a very central thing that is also related to the last question too, is that I think the biggest thing is our book and our work is a way for us to contribute to others. It's a gift that we are giving. I really approach it from an attitude of service. You know, what we have to give benefits others. Conversely, the way this works too, then, if we agree with that mindset, then by not giving our work to others becomes very selfish, right? Because you have something that can help people, and if you keep it to yourself, you're not helping people intentionally, right?
That's how the guy who invented the Heimlich maneuver felt. He was just like,
but I can crack his ribs. So in answer to this question, I think what I would be considering is, how can I contribute to other people? One of the things I found with my own writing is I would say in the last 3 years, I've become a lot less interested in my own writing. Like, I still enjoy writing. I like doing it, but I really like looking at other people's work. I really like analyzing people's work. I like trying to see the mechanics. That's why we have the fine print. Let me rephrase. That's literally why we have the fine print stream, because one, I think people enjoy having their work looked at. Okay. Not necessarily critically. Not everyone enjoys the critical approach, but people like having it receive attention. You know, and some people like the critical stuff too. So for them, also giving them that, so the question I would be asking you is, what can you give to writers? Period. What can you give to writers? So for instance, you have an open mic. Okay. We have an open mic too. One of the things we did when we started our open mic, a couple considerations is, one, we're one of the only weekly open mics in the city right now. I think there's only 2 or 3 right now. And we're on the west side. We're in a location in the city that doesn't have a whole lot going on artistically. So this is just a quick example of something we're doing to try to give to people. But there's other ways to do it too. So for instance, you have a platform. You're the Garage Poets Open Mic. Are there people in Boston that have books coming out? Can you help them promote their books? Can you, maybe you don't have the money to feature them. Okay. Can you at least share their posts, comment on their posts, just so the algorithm likes it? If they're down for an interview, can you interview them? Can you connect people? Is there an event you could host that you think would allow people to kind of advance in their writing if they're serious about it? What can you do to give to people? Because I think a lot of times poets are, what do you see them posting? This is my poem. This is my poem. This is my poem. You know, I think writers tend to be kind of selfish to a degree, which is ironic because we spent a lot of time talking about books and how we're shy about saying it. You know what I mean? But then the other elements of it tend to be a lot more selfish. But that would be my approach. What would, if you had to answer this question, what would you say, Matthias?
I think one of the things that poets are doing, here's an analogy. I think that when it comes to poetry, or when it comes to like poetry books, I think that if it was like a movie, then a lot of people are trying to sell their poetry books to the Rotten Tomatoes critics and not the audience. Mm-hmm. And like, that's a crucial mistake. So, and what I mean by that is, to be clear, it's not a bad idea to try to sell your stuff to the critics. Like, it's for the critics to believe that it's good. But it's a bad idea for that to be your primary objective, I think. So, like, let's say, for example, if the only place that you're promoting your poetry book is at poetry slams and poetry shows and poetry this and poetry that, then, like, yeah, like, you're getting it in front of a whole bunch of poets, and that might be great. Mm-hmm. But, like, do you know who's really impressed by poetry? People that typically don't run across poetry, because they're like, what the heck is going on? Like, look, you're so talented. Like, all of my aunts and uncles think that I'm the best poet ever, right? They just don't listen to other poets, right? And so it's like this, so what I would say is, like, we kind of used this example a little bit earlier, but like, if you had a poetry book that was all about your love of comic books, then like, go to Comic-Con, right? Go to these comic book conventions. Mm-hmm. And now you're around a whole bunch of people that are not poets, but they would be interested in your work, because they're like, oh, like, I'm not a poet, but you got a poetry book that's all about these characters that I like. That's all. Or maybe copyright doesn't allow you to write about the characters I like, but like, maybe you write about your other characters, right? Or maybe you write about, like, around things, right? So yeah, it's just to say that, like, I think something that would be helpful when it comes to connecting with your audience is understanding your audience is not the critics, right? Or it's not the people. You might love the poets and you're like, man, I really, really love all of the poets that I'm around. But I'm like, yeah, but who is your work speaking to? Yeah. Because typically if something hits me like, oh my gosh, like, that was beautiful, like, the poet version of myself is not the thing that's saying it. It's the person that, you know, went through this experience, or it's the poem, it's the person that had to have that conversation or somewhere else, or, you know what I mean? So, like, that's not the side of me that's really, really affected. And so really thinking about, man, like, if I'm saying something from, like, at a poetry open mic, like, take away, if somebody really feels something, they're not really feeling it because I'm like, as a poet, this is how I feel. You know, like, that's not what's happening. The thing that's happening is you're talking to a person, and the thing that you're registering it with is a person, and then try to tap into, okay, it's like, what did I touch here? How did this affect you? So, and where is more of that? Okay, so, like, your work is about, oh man, somebody like, and it wasn't necessarily in our poetry community. I think it was in Canton, actually. Like, we had this show, and no, it wasn't in Canton. It was in Yellow Springs, at the Spirited Goat. And this lady had this poem, and, well, she had like 2 poems, and they're all about kind of, like, in a way, kind of talking about healing, like, but using, like, herbs and teas and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it was like this metaphor for a healing process, like a mental healing process or something like that. I'm like, okay, but if you take that and you are like, man, like, what would it look like for you to, like, be able to sell your book out of one of the herbal places that is in your community? Right? Like, if you approach somebody that runs one of those and is like, hey, I think that, you know, my book would really do well. Oh man, this would be a really good place. I could hold an event here, because this is like, the synergy between our purposes. And so yeah, it's like now you're like, okay, I'm taking the poetry audience, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not necessarily getting a whole bunch of poets, a bunch of people that would like to see it at open mic, or a whole bunch of people that would just go to a poetry show. I'm getting people that would be interested in this content, and these are not people that they might be looking at like, oh, I usually buy my this, that, and the third from this place, but they have a poetry reading here. I would love to see that, and I think those are your more likely buyers. And so, yeah, just when it comes to I'm sorry, but just when it comes to connecting with your audience, just really connecting with people that your work is speaking to, and not just who you're speaking in front of at the time.
I think if we approach it from like an open mic experience, you know, what if every like once a month we did it at a different venue, just to start developing, you know, collaboration can be really helpful too. So like developing those relationships with other business owners, you know, because maybe there's another place, you know, they do open mics at flower shops, they do open mics at barber shops.
Shout out to La Baptiste here in Columbus.
Yeah. Are they still doing poetry shows?
No, not anymore. But like, I was just saying, like we used to. Yeah.
It was nice. Yeah. Mechanic shops.
Well,
any place.
I don't want to speak to that. So maybe I don't even know if they're still there.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, hopefully they're still there.
Yeah.
Maybe I should research that.
I've been there since pre-COVID. So just kind of some things. Maybe there's other venues and things that you can reach out to, even like libraries. It's nice when you partner with a library because, in general, they have more reach.
Yeah.
You know, and they'll blast you on their socials and things like that. So if I were trying to do it from an open mic perspective, that's one thing I would consider. Also considering like unusual type of events. Like right now, we don't have a date yet. We're working with Third Way to schedule a morning mic sometime in April, so keep an eye out for that. And things.
Both sides.
One's okay.
Oh,
you can take the other out. But yeah, just some other things there. All right. It's late. You guys got 5 questions to to ask yourself as you prepare about thinking about your own poetry collections, things like that. If you have other questions that you think would be helpful to ask yourself, or good questions for writers to consider as they make their first collections, feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the comments afterwards. Thank you guys for hanging with us. Just some quick reminders again. One of the things you see at the bottom, we have a poetry retreat coming up April 5th through April 7th.
Oh, yeah.
In Columbus. It's a 3-day retreat. It's in the city. Just a quick note, we don't provide housing, but we do give you, we're going to be writing at least 3 new poems. We're going to be workshopping at least 2 poems per poet. We'll do some excursions. We have open mic planned and things like that. So if you want to be part of that experience in Columbus, visit diversitypoetry.com /retreat. That'll be helpful for that. Other things, we have our poetry open mic on Friday. Okay, in person at Third Way Cafe at 7:30 p.m. 2 poems. It's completely free. And on Thursday, again, we do free author photos. I don't have the location just yet because I don't know where I'll be. But if you're interested in getting a location and you want to get a quick free author photo, keep an eye out on our socials.
Oh, yeah.
Other things, Matthias?
Oh, no, is it, I think.
Cool.
We're doing good.
All right. Thanks to everyone who hung out with us today. Greatly appreciate you. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
We will see you guys next time. Hope you guys have a good morning, good day, good afternoon. We'll catch you guys later.